Looks like we should be started now. I think. How's it going, folks? Can you hear me now? Hopefully the audio is actually coming through now. I would love if someone could let me know if my audio is coming through, although I'm sure it is now. Had to do a whole annoying darn thing, and now that annoying thing is all done. I'm just getting our YouTube chat ready. Sorry, folks. Just working all this stuff out here. Here we go. Now we're looking a little bit better. Okay. How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Dustin Cormier, and welcome to my channel, How to Rock Spirit. Today, we're doing an episode called, continuing our Chinese Tropical Astrology series, where we blend Chinese astrology with Tropical Vedic Astrology. Today we're doing Sagittarius and Pisces Sun, since they're both ruled by Jupiter, with the year of the rabbit, who also has a deep Jupiterian vibe, technically. As usual, ladies and gentlemen, feel free to make a comment on our YouTube comments, and we'll see them live, and I'll answer your questions as they come along, however much I can. Now, I'm just checking to make sure we're all kosher here. Oh, that's a big face. There we go. Okay. Now, can everybody see this? Yeah, that should be correct. Okay, so now we're ready to go today. Yeah, I was good. Okay. So yeah, thanks for coming. Today should be a good one. As usual, I've got a few books that at the very end, we're going to talk about the individual combinations of Sagittarius with the rabbit and Pisces with the rabbit. This first video, the start of this thing, we're going to talk about the rulership of Jupiter as it relates to Sagittarius and Pisces. And having a Sagittarius or Pisces sun, which is the nature of these, that's the nature of our video today. And then about halfway through talking about those two, we're going to talk about the rabbit as it is. And then yes, at the very end, we're going to do separate videos describing the individual natures of them. So, thank you so much for coming, and I can't wait to rap with you about this. Let's get started. As usual, I like to show the personality of the person who's talking to you about this stuff. My name is Dustin Cormier, Leo rising, moon in Sagittarius in the 5th house. So I've got a good understanding of the Sagittarius vibe, I think. My sun is in Scorpio in the 4th house. I'm in the year of the goat. The boar is my month branch, and water horse is my day pillar. In Chinese astrology, it's suggested that the heaven stem of your day pillar is who you are. I am yang water, and that is the most concise description of my energy. And as we go along with this series, and as well as just with my channel in general, we're going to be talking about the differences between these figures and the importance of the day stem in relation to explaining what you are in your Chinese astrology. But for now, the sign of the rabbit, this will be relevant to you if you have it as your year sign, your month sign, or your day sign. So keep that in mind when we consider these. It's not just the year of the rabbit. It's any rabbit energy that you have. If you are a Sagittarius or a Pisces, or you have any emphasis of Jupiter, Sagittarius, or Pisces, this video is for you. We tend in these videos to describe the rulerships of the Sun being in the sign, Sun in Sagittarius and Sun in Pisces, as one of 5 Pancha Tattvas. Pancha means 5, and Tattva means essence. This is coming from Ernst Wilhelm's Graha Sutras. If you'll just give me one moment, I'll show you what that book looks like. This book has changed completely how I think about everything astrology. Graha Sutras by Ernst Wilhelm. I highly recommend it, just in general, and also specifically in regards to this other dimension of astrology that a lot of people are not quite as onto as I feel they should be. I'll get to that in a moment. What I like to say is that usually, well, I'll just break it out right here. Do you ever notice that there's more to the qualities of Western sun signs than just their elements and modality? When you read about Jupiter Sun or Pisces Sun, and there's qualities there, and you think, okay, so Sagittarius is a fire sign, and it's a mutable sign, so that's where the qualities come from. But there's more to it than that. When you think of a Sagittarius person relating with a Scorpio or a Leo or an Aries, those Scorpio, Leo, and Aries are all in the fire Pancha Tattva, and they have a similar relationship to Sagittarius and Pisces. We're talking about Sagittarius and Pisces as the ether element, and Leo, Scorpio, Aries as the fire element. There's a certain dynamic there, which you wouldn't know just from thinking that, Sagittarius is trine to Leo, or that Sagittarius is the second house from Scorpio, or that Sagittarius is mutable fire. There's another layer of the planetary relationships, and that's what I'm trying to spool out today by talking about what it is about the Jupiter rulership of Sagittarius and Pisces that makes those signs what they are. Something I just wanted to say. Hello, creepy kitten. Nice to see you here. As usual, if anybody would like to join the conversation and make any comments, from the tall to the small, we appreciate them all. And I'll do what I can. If somebody makes a comment, I'll read through, and if it's relevant to our topic, I'll try to speak it in the moment. And if it's something that I should just talk about at the very end, feel free to, I'll try to get it in at some point. But we do want to keep the conversation related to today's topic, of course. Now, before we go any further, I just want to say a little self-plug. Check out DustinCormier.net for more junk about me. Check out my band, Bosom. It's Big Up Sour Mash. We just put out a new album just like a little bit ago in December of 2018. And also check out my book, Solipsis Eclipse. You can find it on Amazon. It's all about psychedelics and erotica and all the fun stuff that I'm really into. Now, this is a page that I like to put here just so that everybody has a sense of a certain before I get to this, I just want to leave this screen and say, when we read about the nature of Jupiter from the Ernst Wilhelm's Graha Sutras, he's talking basically about a person who has Jupiter as their highest Shadbala. Shadbala means 6 strengths. It's a whole bunch of mathematical calculations that we do in Vedic astrology. Remember, I'm a tropical Vedic astrologer, not a sidereal one. I go by the tropical measurements of the Western astrologers, but I use Vedic considerations for the data. So in any case, when you listen to this reading of Sagittarius or Pisces coming through the rabbit energy, consider that you might have the Sun in Jupiter, the Sun in Sagittarius, excuse me, and that's generally a good place for the Sun. Jupiter and the Sun are friends. But if you've got some like weakness to your Sun, like if you've got Saturn in Leo, or if you've got Saturn with Jupiter and the Sun in Sagittarius, or another malefic, if you've got something ugly that's bumping either the Sun or Jupiter, let's say if you've got the Sun in Sagittarius and your Jupiter is debilitated in Capricorn, like if it's really hitting on that debilitation point, maybe Capricorn is also your 8th house, which is a bad house generally, a malefic house to have any planet. So if you have all these sort of debilitating things to your Jupiter, it's going to be harder for you to express the pure tones of the Sun in Sagittarius or the Sun in Pisces. So this next slide talks about the strength of the house lord. And I should also say, if you're a Sagittarius rising, or if you're a Pisces rising, or if you've got Jupiter in your first house, like close to the ascendant, or if you've got Jupiter conjunct your first lord, let's say if you're a Virgo rising and you've got Jupiter conjunct Mercury, these are all things that will get that means a deep Jupiter energy in you. And when you read this reading, you can use that. Even if you don't have the Sun in Sagittarius or Pisces, you've got a Jupiter energy because of those things. So with this next slide, it's going to show you the strength of how to see the strength of Jupiter and how to see the strength of the Sun according to Vedic astrology. I'm going to show you the slide, and I'm just, feel free to pause it and just consider these things when you're considering the strength of your Jupiter. Because when you're going to read about what's so good about Jupiter as a Sun in Sagittarius or Sun in Pisces person, if you have Jupiter really grossly aligned in your D1 chart, if you've got an ugly Jupiter and your Sun is in Sagittarius or Pisces, you won't be able to take full advantage of your Sun nature. And that's something that you're going to have to consider throughout this reading. There's the ideal Jupiterian person. And sometimes in karma, we want to express that, but our other karmas get in the way of it. And that is just simply, if that is the case with you, always consider that we can take, as Sri Yukteswar said, it's good to see the thraldom of the energy field. If you've got an ugly chart, so to say, quote unquote, to me, as a Leo rising, I like to think that that's a challenge. That is an opportunity for you to realign a whole snake's body of karma that could be put to better use. But it takes endurance and it takes earnest energy towards self-realization. It takes meditation, and it takes an every moment mindfulness in dealing with those karmas. So the point is that if you have a strong Jupiter themes in your chart, but it's difficult for you to express Jupiter because of the way your Jupiter is, don't ever be discouraged, because that is an open door to the retribution of karma, and that's something that everybody wants. So look at it positively. Now this is the page that I was talking about. Feel free to pause it here. Take a peek at the dignity of the Sun as well as the dignity of Jupiter when you're considering a reading of the Sun in Sagittarius and the Sun in Pisces. And this is saying the same thing. A handful of rice from the lowest of Krishna's devotees is worth as much to Krishna within as all the wealth of a rich Brahmin, if it is given up with a pure heart to Krishna, which is the divine in all. What matters is your quality of devotion and surrender to what is, to the bliss of your own nature. Okay, so that was a bit of a mouthful. Is everybody following me so far? This is about Sag Sun, Pisces Moon, or vice versa. Roxanne, this reading is about Sagittarius Sun or Pisces Sun, coming through the energy of the year of the rabbit. If you've got the rabbit somewhere in your Chinese astrology chart, and you have Sagittarius Sun or Pisces Sun, or any emphasis of Jupiter, then this video is for you. Even in a way, I should be careful because it's not really about the moon sign. When we get to the later descriptions of the individual Sagittarius Sun, Year of the Rabbit, or Pisces Sun in Year of the Rabbit, the authors that we read specifically had the sun in mind. So consider that the sun is mostly what we're talking about here. Unless you have like Sagittarius rising or Pisces rising. Those are also deep Jupiter tones. And if you have the rabbit with that, you might get something out of these readings too. Now, again, the sun is a planet, and its expression requires the harmonic resonance of other planets in certain sacred geometries. You have to consider all the other planets and how they relate to the sun when you deal with the sun's energy. Now, the sun does well in Sagittarius and in Pisces. The sun is good friends with those two. So the sun in Sagittarius or Pisces is already a good-looking placement for your sun, thankfully. It's even better if Jupiter is in the 11th, 12th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 2nd, 3rd, or 4th house from the sun. That's a permanent friend to Jupiter as well as the temporary friend. These are things that you can find out by listening to the readings of Ryan Kirksack. I'm doing his astrology apprenticeship course, and that's where I get a lot of this information. And you can read about these in Ryan's book, The Art and Science of Vedic Astrology. So the sun's looking good already if you've got it in Sag or Pisces. Now, consider where your Jupiter is. Even though I should say that Jupiter in Capricorn, as we can see, Saturn is neutral to Jupiter. So if you got Jupiter in Aquarius, it's kind of whatever. But if you've got Jupiter in Capricorn, it's not only not a friend to Jupiter, but it's also the place of debilitation for Jupiter. Of course, the best place for Jupiter is in the sign of Jupiter's natural friend, Cancer, where it is also exhausted. That's the highest, purest expression of Jupiter available. If you've got Jupiter in Leo, Cancer, Sagittarius, its own sign, or Pisces, or Aries, or Scorpio, those are all the placements of Jupiter in friendly signs. And that's usually a good reading for Jupiter. Also consider if Jupiter is between 12 and 18 degrees. That's an extremely good place for any Jupiter, because that's a Yuva Avashta. It means it's every sign is strongest between 12 and 18 degrees, and that's a positive placement for any planet there. And if Jupiter is in Gemini, Virgo, like mine is, Taurus, or Libra, that's considered a not as ideal placement for Jupiter. Jupiter in a Mercury sign is kind of not, it's not doing what its energy prefers to do. It's very materially calculating, and it tries to expand through Earth, the Earth Pancha Tattva, being ruled by Mercury. And Jupiter does better when it's not thinking about all those little mercurial organizations of managing time resources and these sorts of things. It doesn't do as good with the details. It's better when it can let go of all those and think of its role, its spiritual role, no matter what the details and circumstances are. Sort of the same thing with regard to Jupiter in Taurus or Libra, except that that's more of about Jupiter is a planet whose strength resides generally within itself. A well-placed Jupiter will have a very good sense of how its energy can relate to the world around it. And when its energy is concerned with its own role, like when it's in these friendly places, Leo, Cancer, Aries, Scorpio, Sag, those are all placements of Jupiter where it's thinking about its own interests. And that sounds greedy, but you got to understand that a tree expresses its best fruit when the trunk is well developed, the self is well developed, because then it can give of its fruit much better. This is, just the specific style that Jupiter is best at. If we were talking about Venus right now, we'd be talking about the fact that the fruit is important, and, Venus is just as important as Jupiter. But it is important for you to have your own self-center, and Jupiterian people are supposed to be good at that. So if you've got the sun in Jupiter, if you've got the sun in Sagittarius or Pisces, and your Jupiter is in Gemini or Virgo, Taurus, or Libra, it's going to say that you're supposed to be good at configuring your own role. And the sun in Sagittarius and Pisces is well served to consider deeply its life from that point of how can I, with my skills and my talents, relate to the world. And when Jupiter is in Gemini, Virgo, Taurus, Libra, it kind of takes away from the sun's energy. So keep this in mind. The placement of Jupiter is going to deeply affect the effectiveness of the sun in Sagittarius or Pisces. Also consider the Avashta, the state of the planet, and all the dignities that we can think of. Even Shadbala. If Jupiter is very weak in Shadbala, it'll give you a harder time to express the sun in Sagittarius or Pisces. Okay, how we doing, folks? Any questions? I have Cancer Jupiter in my 8th house. Nice, Mont Redeemer. Jupiter in Cancer is always looking pretty good. In the 8th house, well, the thing is that everybody's got an 8th house, and you got to deal with it. Having a benefic, a good planet like Jupiter in the 8th house, it hurts the nature of Jupiter a little bit. But I'd say that's generally a good thing. Generally, if you've got Jupiter in your 8th, in Cancer where it's exalted, that means you've got a very good capacity to let energy go. And the 8th house is like Scorpio energy. So when you have to commit resources to something, it's probably very easy and natural for you to do. And that's a good thing to have. Hi, Goosey. Nice to see you again. Sweet. Unity around the corner. Yeah, Mr. Miles, I would love to do that. I'm pretty sure these comments are going to be here. YouTube does keep them, but I'm going to write that down. Unity around the corner at hotmail.com. If you'd like to contact me, Mr. Philip Daniel Miles, my email is howtorockcampfire, all one word, at gmail.com. And yeah, email me anytime, man. I'd love to do that with you. Now, what about Sun in the 9th house in Leo? Is that Jupiter energy since it relates to Sagittarius? Yes, creepy kitten. The Sun does well in Leo, no matter what. The Sun is in its own sign in Leo. Now, I wouldn't take this reading that we're doing here. Since you've got the Sun in the 9th house, there's a Sagittarius vibe there. But I would look up, it's going to be at some point that I do the video, but I would look up the fire Pancha Tattvas, which is Leo, Aries, and Scorpio, Sun, with the year of the rabbit energy, if we were talking about rabbit energy. Because the houses are just like our internal perspective of the planet. But the planet is in Leo. It's going to express Leo energy. So you must have Sagittarius rising, I'm assuming, because Leo is the 9th house from Sagittarius. In which case, yeah, there's a huge Jupiter emphasis there. So, yeah, I would say if you've got Sagittarius rising with the Sun in Leo in the 9th house, you would probably get something out of this Sagittarius rabbit reading. Jupiter, Scorpio and Jupiter is a good place for Jupiter. Thanks, Philip. Scorpio and Jupiter is a good place because Jupiter and Mars are friends. And the degrees of 23 in Scorpio, that's a good place. In the feminine signs like Scorpio, between 6 to 18 is a good place for any planet. Creepy kitten, Scorpio rising. Okay. Oh, that makes sense. So, still creepy kitten. Okay, so since you don't have Sagittarius rising, I would say I wouldn't take you to have like a completely Sun and Jupiter energy. I would say stick with, for these readings, when we're considering blending the Western with the Chinese, consider that you're a Sun in Leo, which is the fire Pancha Tattva. And we'll probably do that video 12 videos after this one. It's quite a few, but we got to go through them all. Now, without further ado, folks, I do love answering these questions, so feel free to shoot them at me, folks. But we got to keep going on here for everybody watching for the purpose. I want to get to talking about how the rabbit relates to Jupiter as soon as we can. But we've got to go through Jupiter first, so that when we get to the rabbit, we can talk about how they blend. Now, feel free to give this a read. And this is saying basically what I was saying. If you've got the Sun in Sagittarius or Pisces, we're going to learn about the qualities of Jupiter and the Ether Pancha Tattva. That's our subject for today. And if you've got the Sun in Sagittarius or Pisces, this energy, the quality of the Ether Pancha Tattva, is going to be something that you want to express. And if you've got a good Jupiter, it's going to express these qualities. And if you've got an ugly Jupiter, like debilitated or whatever, you're not going to be able to express these pure qualities as well. And you're going to want to, but you got to balance out the need for your Sun to express these and the want. Sometimes you just won't have the energy or resources to express the pure energy of your Sun in Sagittarius or Pisces. In which case, if that's so, use whatever is strongest in your chart to kind of help compensate for the Sun's energy not being able to express its fullest self. Usually everybody's got the resources somewhere to help keep the whole wheel turning. And so that's what this previous slide says. Yeah. So when we're talking about the qualities of the dominant element in an individual, which today is Jupiter, consider the effects in respect to the whole horoscope, and thus to the person as a whole. Now, this is the pure essence of Jupiter. What Jupiter and what the Sun in Sagittarius or Pisces naturally expresses when it's in its full strength. This comes from Brihat Parashara Shastra, the results of the 5 elements. The ether originating is one wise in taking advantage from words, knowledgeable in policy and conduct, confident, joined with wisdom, and open to that. And they tend to be very tall, the Jupiter energy coming out. Especially if your first lord, your ascendant lord, is somehow an aspect to Jupiter. Now, the individual with the ether element dominating is wise in taking advantage from words. So that's to say that they pay attention to the words he or she reads, and thus they learn from them. I'm a Sagittarius moon, and I love to learn about words. I see what the word, it's like a metaphysical awareness. You know, some words are just in the ether, and it's only, you know, human consciousness develops on planets all over all galaxies. And some words will be shared. You know, we used to speak in grunts, like, but words have a certain intrinsic resonance to understanding. And those words will be the same on any planet where human consciousness evolves. And Jupiter people have a sense of this. So they sense the pipelines of depth and meaning in words and in concepts a lot of times too. It's like this ethereal ventilation that just comes to them. So individuals with prominent ether influence are also fine grammarians. Ether creates an inner happiness from which blooms confidence and assurance, as well as the ability to perform difficult tasks without worry. This kind of comes from the fact of, as I said, the Jupiter person is naturally inclined to focus on the stalk of the tree, so that whatever situation, the self, how do I, as myself, relate to my world in the best possible way? So a Sagittarius person is like the globetrotter, they say, you know? Same thing with Pisces, but in a different way, but still the same thing. Sagittarius just like leaps for, this is what my heart says, and here we go, I'm going to try it. And they're consciously trying to develop and cultivate a sense of the self, which is there in any situation. The self that comes through, you know, they go to a job and they're in construction, and even if they're having a hard time of it, and it's a hard thing to do, they have an internal thing in their minds that says, if I fuck up this job and I have to go and get another one, I'm learning what I am. So why don't I just be fully in this moment and just try it fully? And if I lose, I'll just get up again and I'll try the next thing. I'm bound to land on something. That's huge Jupiter energy. And same thing with Pisces, especially in regards to emotions. Pisces are super sensitive, and they can really deeply want to expand emotionally. And if a Pisces sun has a sort of gnarled up Jupiter, they'll expand deeply into some emotional sphere with a relationship or with a job or something, and they'll be like, wow, that I'm so sensitive, like I am just never gonna try this again, because they tried it at first and reality kind of went squashed them, and they got a deep emotional fear. We see that with a lot of Pisces. But Pisces is eventually, after a lot of that, in the same way, it's ruled by Jupiter. So it buoyantly develops a sense that I want to be happy. So I have to break through these crystallized shells of emotional realities that are squashing me. I just know that it's like it's like the grammar thing. Pisces people, as much as Sagittarius, knows to be human is to be effective and practical and happy. And if I'm not there right now, I just gotta keep working at it. If it's not, this situation isn't working, I'll just keep going because of that internal sense of how I relate to my world. And if I don't, then I gotta just, what else can I do but keep trying? It's very much a Jupiter thing between those two signs. Pisces, especially if it's well aligned and if it's got a strong Jupiter, that Pisces person can go through the craziest emotional trials and they learn to love it. It's a funny thing. Like, they can suffer for people. That's why it's a 12th house energy, you know? They can be with someone who's sick or ill or people who have gross emotional baggage, and the Pisces will be so super sensitive to it, and they'll get hit by it because they're sensitive, but they'll still see the beauty in the person. Pisces does this ventilation in an emotional way, in a feeling way. So if you have a Pisces person in your life who has a strong Jupiter energy, they'll have a sense of who you're supposed to be. And you'll come at them with whatever gross energy you can, and they'll go through it all, and they'll go through all the strife and all your weird emotions, and they'll still love you, and they'll still be able to, like, wink at you and say, you're going to get through this. And everyone loves Pisces for that reason, right? So, thus, ether creates an inner happiness from which blooms confidence and assurance, as well as the ability to perform difficult tasks without worry. Ether also causes the individual to know proper conduct and to follow the policies necessary to fulfill their duties and activities. It's part of this ethereal sort of sense that they have. It's like, you know, if they've got a job, they're going to be thinking and projecting, like, what is it that I got to do in this job? Then what is the nature of this job as it relates to reality? And where are the key fine points that I got to hit this brick of reality in order to make it work most ergonomically to myself? So they tend to know the policies of the job that they're dealing with. They can be good with law and stuff like that. Sagittarius and Pisces, as they say. From ether comes all things in the Vedic philosophy, and thus from ether also comes the greatest wisdom. Like I said, it's that timeless, no matter what planet you're on, there's certain things about the way of reality, and Jupiter people have a strong sense of these timeless things. So the ether individual is therefore wise. And since ether is expansive, these people are always open to greater wisdom, which is an awesome, beautiful thing. Ether is space, and thus the ether individual takes up more space, and they're usually taller. Their height is matched by their girth, and so they're not tall, skinny people. It's more of a Saturn vibe. These people are generally tall and well built. Either they can be a bit plump, or they're actually just big and tall, and like they take up a lot of space muscularly and everything. Even the rabbit kind of relates to that. Rabbit relates with like the tendons, and so a rabbit Jupiter person can be tall and take up a lot of space, and they can have like strong tendons and elastic bodies that are they can be athletic too. Okay, so this is the relationships of the Pancha Tattvas. Excuse me. The big one that we're trying to look here, is the generative cycle. Air feeds fire, fire feeds water, water feeds earth, earth feeds ether, ether feeds air. So a Jupiter person will have a strong emphasis in their lives on developing that internal spirit, that internal self-confidence, which will allow them to face whatever duties, whatever Saturn they've got to face in life. A strong Jupiter and a heavy emphasis of Jupiter, no, I should say a strong Jupiter makes a person able to deal with Saturn. So if you have a strong Jupiter, you'll be able to deal with Saturn much better. If you have a strong emphasis of Jupiter, but your Jupiter's weak, you're probably going to damage your Saturnian responsibilities and those things and those realities which hit you, which you have no control over. Like I said, well, Pisces and Sagittarius are both like this. If you have Sun in Sag or Pisces with a weak Jupiter, it might tend to mean that you want to have that internal confidence to go through things, but you might not have it. And so you'll be drawn to have responsibilities and to be responsible and to deal with Saturn. And if you don't have a strong Jupiter, then you're probably just going to be very crushed constantly by the fact that you didn't have the strength to get through that thing, whatever that job, whatever that responsibility was. In which case, you've just got to call upon all of the elements to give you a sense of balance, especially Mercury. Mercury and its strength is always a very good help to a weak Jupiter, because Mercury is kind of what Jupiter stands on, as we're going to talk about. So consider this when we're thinking about all these things. A person may be feeling debilitated or incapable with regard to their Pancha Tattva ruler because of temporary conditions. That does not mean that their difficulties regarding the symbol are permanent or beyond reproach. This kind of means, like, if you've got like a weak, or if you've got, you're a Jupiter person, you've got Sagittarius or Pisces sun, and you're trying to deal with the nature of Jupiter. If you happen to come into a Mercury dasha, and you've got a very weak Mercury, that period is going to emphasize that you need to develop, it's going to amplify Mercury. So you might be trying to do your Jupiter thing, and the Mercury dasha will be saying in plain sight that you need to start organizing yourself. You can't just be expanding willy-nilly into faithfully from your heart and yourself into all these different realities and then never actually stick to them. Mercury kind of sticks to the details of things. So if it's the Mercury dasha, which is what we've got right here, if you're in the Mercury dasha, you're going to learn to let go of the Jupiter instinct and learn to develop some logical, consistent patterns of business sense. This is a Mercury thing, right? If you're in the Mercury dasha and you're a Jupiter person, it's a perfect opportunity for you to give you a huge, necessary karmic key to unlocking the potentials of your sun in Sagittarius or Pisces. Because Mercury is what Jupiter stands on. If Mercury is weak, no, let's just hold on. The organization, okay, good. The organization and efficiency of Mercury's experience. This represents data, which is Jupiter's stepladder to great practical purposes. Jupiter's got lots of ideas about how the world works and how nature works. And if it does not calmly balance its checkbook and pay its debts and go to manage its time well, it could have all these great ideas and they will be like many branches. It's like a Medusa thing, many branches with little roots to hold it down. So Mercury is always important for anybody with a strong Jupiter emphasis. Ether, Jupiter, needs Mercury's organization realism and down-to-earth experience in whatever field in order to inform its ideas and executive talents. Jupiter is in the ether, in the ventilation of knowing how the world works. And it has the sense of how the world ought to work, and it's very idealistic. But it can be so dreamy, and, you know, like Sag and Pisces can be so dreamy and just like, I got all these great ideas. And what is the point of having all those ideas if you can't, like, if you've got nothing to build off of? A truly strong Jupiter person will, like, do the Mercury thing and have a job and, you know, go and learn how the world works around them, in their vicinity, in their, not just, like, everywhere, but also, like, in their town, you know? Jupiter does very well through the Mercury thing of learning, like, who lives around town, who's resourceful. If you're a mechanic, if you're a Jupiter-ruled mechanic, you've got lots of ideas of people who you can network with and how to do the business of mechanic well. Jupiter can do that. But if you don't know, like, where Jerry lives on, you know, a few blocks down, who has all the special types of wrenches that you need, or, you know, like, who has the car parts that you need, or if you don't have a car yourself, you know, and you don't go around and meet people in town, that's more of like a Mercury kind of thing. And that type of earthy, real world, close to your environment experience is going to hugely improve your capacity to use Jupiter's awareness of the nature of your craft and your field. Jupiter's idealism and book knowledge finds answers and opportunities grounded by immediate world experience with Mercury's hands-on knowledge. If Mercury is weak, one will be less able to manage the many details that any accomplishment requires. This disrupts Jupiter, who will be then unable to focus on a greater purpose, because there are too many little loose ends to take care of as a result of Mercury's negligence. While you, the Jupiter person, are trying to build that faith in yourself that I'm finding a role for myself and I'm finding how I can work best in the world, if you've got a million loose ends to take care of, you're never really going to develop a sense of, it's like if Jupiter takes a job and they don't deal with the Mercury side, with these loose ends and things, they might not get a sense of how they can, of this constant development of self-realization. You can't do it if you don't engage in the field that you're in at the time. All you're going to have is a confused blur of memories of being in this job, and it didn't work. It wasn't for me. And then I went to this job, and it didn't work. I don't know why. I was so focused on learning about myself in all these jobs, and I got no sense of myself, even though I went into a million different things. It's because that person didn't take the time and the effort and the dedication to make sure all the loose ends are figured out. And a Mercury dasha will force you to do that. If you're in your Mercury dasha and you're a Jupiter person, take full advantage. Wherever you are in your life, learn the nuts and bolts of the job that you're in. And if it doesn't work out and you quit, you've got the Jupiter. You've got the capacity to get up on your feet and try the next one. But at some point, you got to start counting the numbers. Now, Saturn and Mercury are different. I've been lately especially trying to develop a sense of the difference between the two. Gonna get some water here. My purple fruit vitamin C juice. I think a lot of people confuse Saturn with Mercury, especially, like, you know, thankfully the Pancha Tattvas break them up. Because they're both earth signs, they're quote unquote, like, you know, like the Western framework of the 4-element module is important. Taurus, Capricorn, and Virgo are all connected somehow to this like 4-element Earth. But there's also the Pancha Tattvas. That's why we're talking about these things today, because it's a different conception of how the planets relate to each other that is on top of or underneath or within the 4-element model. This is good because this gives us a sense of the difference between Saturn and Mercury. Saturn is more of a planet where, like, Mercury is a constant figuring out of what you got to do. It's the cultivation of time management. Mercury is. I hope I said that. Mercury, the Earth Pancha Tattva, is a constant, consistent time management, cultivation, and development. Saturn is more of a thing that's like watching out for the potholes. Mercury's time management is not necessarily saving for a rainy day. Mercury's time management is more about trying to advance, actually. Mercury is like this earthy thing that Jupiter, like, that we all, it is like this. A strong Mercury means that the person has a sense of the resources that they have around them and a way of using their time management effectively that's so effective that it pushes them forward just because there's so much consistency and consistent energy in all the details of the things that they need in order to make the present project work effectively. Saturn is a different thing. It's air. It's wind. And a Saturn person has the sense of how to deal with changes in reality that can't really be avoided. And a Saturn person is the one who saves for a rainy day. Go away. So a strongly Jupiter person is very good for anything Saturn, because Saturn has a need to fulfill duty. You can have a strong Mercury and have a strong sense of where your time management ought to go, but you might just want to stay there without having the visceral sense of how to fulfill all the duties that you need to fulfill, how to push through the resistance of your body, and how to develop a consistent sense of yourself in a way that will make you go higher. We know that Saturn rules the 10th house energy, and that's like the top of the chart. It shows your reputation and your status. So everybody wants to have a good Saturn. It's the planet of greatness, which builds and develops. It's aware of a Saturn person is aware of what they need to do and change in themselves in order to enact the bottom line, which will make them climb higher and higher. Jupiter has a good sense of how that relates to themselves. I hope you see the difference, and I'm trying not to make this be confused. A metaphor that I love to describe for the difference between, like, say, Jupiter and Saturn is that Sagittarius is the 9th house. It's the 9th sign. Sagittarius has a sense of its role, of itself, timelessly. No matter what culture Jupiter is born into, a Jupiter person will try lots of different things out, lots of different cultures, meet lots of different people, and will be that globetrotter. and they'll develop a sense of how they can effectively be in any role. Saturn is the 10th house. It's after that 9th house. Saturn develops a mutual sense of how the project or the career or an enterprise. Saturn, once you get to the 10th house, you're starting to deal with, okay, I know how I can relate to my reality. Now I need to develop an enterprise, and I need to know how this enterprise can stay above the competition of everybody else. And it will be aware of that. And it will push against the resistance of other companies, other enterprises, other competitors in order to stay on top. Of course, this sense fuels Mercury. Mercury fuels that sense. So you can be strongly Saturnian and get to the top of the pyramid and are pushing all your other competitors away, but if you've got a weak Mercury, you won't have the time management required and energy and resource management required to follow through with the nature of your well-intentioned Saturnian project, your enterprise, your company, whatever it is. So that's the difference between Saturn and Mercury. I think it's an important thing to describe. Now we can see here, I've got an emphasis on Saturn, of Jupiter helping Saturn. Saturn needs the Jupiter person's inspiration, idealism, and faith, and finds satisfying duty by manifesting Jupiter's desires and ideas. Any company, like this is kind of saying, if you're a Sagittarius or Pisces, you'll be good at dealing with 10th house energy, with Saturn energy. It's people like you who have, when the boss is saying, we need people to make this 10th house operation that's trying to go above the competitors, we need someone who's drawn from within themselves to know the nature of the company and to just keep pushing no matter what. And Jupiter people, like you, if this is your game, fulfill Saturn's obligations with a sense of forgiveness and understanding. Like, we tried to get this competitive thing happening and it didn't work. A strongly Saturn person might have that failure and they say, oh, that was the whole thing that I've been doing my whole life. Now it fell apart. Now I'm fucked. Now I'm just going to go and be in someone else's company. Jupiter is the one, if you got a strong Jupiter, you'll be able to help these Saturnian people. Jupiter, a Jupiter person and a Saturn person can work well together in this regard. Maybe not interpersonally, because Saturn and Jupiter are neutral friends, or they're not really friends, they're neutral to each other. But the Saturn person needs the Jupiter person. And Saturn people will help you as a Jupiter person to develop a sense of a particular enterprise, an organization, a company. And you as the Jupiter person will be aware from within how you can effectively relate to that corporation. That corporation stands on people like you. Or else, if, the Saturn person will live a rigid life of empty duty. And they'll do the duty, but it won't be fulfilling. And they might not even, if you're a Saturn person with weak Jupiter, you're just going to get sucked out of your feeling of life. That's just part of what Jupiter is. So, that was a lot. These Pancha Tattvas they can be a difficult thing to talk about, and I'm hoping that I hope I'm describing accurately or clearly a sense of how these 5 planets interact with each other, specifically how Jupiter relates with Mercury and Saturn. Keep this in mind. If you're going through your Saturn dasha, it's very good for you as a Jupiter person, and you should read it that way. I mean, if you've got a weak Saturn, it's going to be tough. But you as a Jupiter person, thankfully, will be able to get over any tough... I mean, if you've got an overemphasized Jupiter, you know, it'll be hard for you to do the Saturn thing. You know, there's a dialogue going on between these two. If you're in your Saturn dasha, consider that it's a perfect opportunity for you to finally put your cleverness, your knowledge, your wisdom of the world, your wisdom of yourself and how you relate to the world, your role in any situation. You'll develop a sense of it, and when Saturn dasha comes, you'll have a good sense of how to bring your positive qualities of self-realization to that company. And you might, you know, you might need to hunker down in the Saturn dasha and just deal with, like, I got lots of ideas, but I'm going to stick with this company. And you should do that, because that Saturn eventually, that ability to conscript yourself to one boss, one group organization, even if that thing finally falls, you will have developed something in that Saturn dasha that is very good for you. So keep that in mind if that's the dasha you're going through. That was a lot. Hope I didn't lose you guys in my comments here. It often happens. Right click to manually select the live. Why you do this? Source. I'm just checking. I'm trying to get my comments going on here, folks. Oh gosh, every now and then I guess I gotta do this. Whatever. Excuse me, folks. I appreciate your patience. For whatever reason, every now and then, it seems that I have to re-authenticate my permission for my computer dealio to get the live YouTube comments. Yep. Oh yeah, by the fifth dimension. Creepy kitten, you love Pisces and Sagittarius. I do not know that Age of Aquarius song, Goosey. It's like part of the whole hair thing, and I love those whole guys. Newsy Bird, I'm new to this. Where do I start? I would say, Mr. Newsy Bird, yeah, you must have just about 2 minutes ago asked that. I know that I just gave a whole lot to you. If you are, I would recommend, particularly to what we're talking about, this first part of the video, I make it pretty complex, and I smash a lot together. In about, like, probably about an hour, we're going to talk about just Sagittarius Sun with the rabbit. And that'll be much cleaner. I will have gotten through all this symbolic stuff, and then we're just going to talk simply about those energies. If you are a rabbit who is Sagittarius or Pisces, stick around, you know, maybe you'll get something out of this. But as for starting with astrology, there are a few books, like, I guess I could recommend. A big one is, I know I got it here somewhere, but I might have just given it to, I might have gave it to a friend. There's a book called Western Astrology. It's like it's a basic book. You know, if you look up on Amazon.ca, you'll be able to find, I'm sure, a basic astrology book that just talks about the sun in all the signs, Mars in all the signs, Venus in all the signs. I suggest you look up your birth chart, see where your planets are in the signs, and then read a book like that, and then just have fun with it. That's what I suggest, Newsabert. Have fun seeing if you see yourself in the planets, in the signs. Thank you, Mont Redeemer. I'm glad that you're enjoying the live. Now, we just went through the whole dasha thing. That always takes up a lot of my consciousness and energy. Let's get to... Actually, I'm going to go to the bathroom really quick, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to come right back, and we're going to continue. We're going to be talking about, we're just starting to get into the Chinese sign of the rabbit and how the rabbit relates to Sagittarius and Pisces. We're going to get into that in one moment. I was just thinking in my head about the fact that it's tough to, well, the dashas are important. That whole thing that I just said with the 5 elements interacting with each other, it is important. What I'm going to start doing in these videos is giving a quick little bit of it on those slides, because all these videos I do, the slides are all figured out in the same way. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the relationships between the planet in question, Jupiter, and the other planets, but not as much as I just did. I think that I'll do that at the end, because then I can say how the rabbit relates to these, and that's, you know, that's just more informative, because I don't want anyone who's reading Jupiter Pisces energy in a certain sign, we don't have to go through the Jupiter dashas and relationships to each other every time. So, but she goes how she goes. Like I said, I'm Sagittarius moon, you know, so I tried that thing and I'm like, oh, you know, I don't feel like that was as good as it could have been. I'll do it better next time. I did the thing, tried it. Well, we'll try the next time. I'll do it a bit differently. But my spirit is not deterred. Okay, so now we're going to start getting into the Chinese astrology. The sun is, first just, you know, a last word on the sun. The sun is like your mission in life. It's the solar system center whose energy powers your whole chart. The Pancha Tattva ruler of the sun sign, this being Jupiter in our case, this can tell you much about yourself and what activities you tend to involve yourself in. In active signs, which in this case is Sagittarius, we're more proactive and outgoing towards Jupiter. So Sagittarius is more proactive and outgoing and sort of like willing to just throw the dart at the wall and, you know, in the world. Like they'll bash their heads through the world in order to get to the ethereal, ventilated, mystical sense of the directive that they're trying to go to. And they'll gain usually lots of experiences in life regarding the world, regarding jobs, and regarding themselves. Pisces more learns about like other people. Pisces has a very deep sense, especially when it's well placed. It has a deep sense of like merging with people and their emotions and learning who they are, how they relate to the world in relation to other people, in relation to other people's emotions. And they also learn very deeply, usually, how other people could do well. The deep spiritual sense of the self in any role for other people. And they don't tend to blast through boulders in the world quite like Sagittarius does. They more like Pisces will sort of willingly lend their hearts to commit to one thing or one project, one idea, and sort of see it through to its logical conclusion. And when that thing does or doesn't work out, they learn about the world in that sort of way. Sagittarius is a bit more willing to let go of it. And they're a bit more outgoing and proactive about it. Pisces is also a sign of like deep like beauty, and Pisces gets a deep sense of a mystical sense of beauty, where Sagittarius I think is more like practical, because practicalness is kind of beautiful too. Pisces has a sense of how to be practical in regards to beauty, and Sagittarius has a sense of how to be practical in terms of just the energy field of what they are and how to fucking wheel and deal and make it all happen the best that it can for themselves as well as a company. Pisces' sense is more of an emotional thing of like, how do I make my boss work his best, or my coworkers and employees work their best on an emotional level. Am I still with you? Yeah. Now, confluence is key. This is a key theme. Oh gosh, I got no water. How do I do this to myself? I'm gonna have to get water at some point. Confluence is key. This is a sense, an astrological, all-encompassing sense that I really got from Vic DeCara. I have him deeply to thank for my sense of this sort of idea. There are so many different types of astrology. Not like just different ways of measuring it or whatever, but, you know, like me being a Vedic guy, I'm really into the nakshatras as well as the Western sense of the planets. The nakshatras is like, it's kind of like the star points, but I'm not into sidereal zodiac. Let's get that out of the way. I don't think that the Virgo energy doesn't come from the constellation. It comes from the Earth's relationship to the sun and to its own chakras, the Earth's own chakras in relationship to this seasonal turning. But there is something to the maps of the stars that is important. The Vedic gnosis calls that the nakshatras, the lunar mansions, of which there are 27. The sky is divided up into 9 times 3 in the Veda. So there's 27 of these nakshatras. The whole point I'm saying this is because, for example, if you have the moon, like I've got the moon in Sagittarius, but my moon is also in what's called Jyesta. Jyesta is like the elder sister. It's Indra. It's very interested in power. It's interested in, shall we say, having a sense of counterattack. Jyesta doesn't want to be seen as an aggressive person, but they actually are. And so whenever they're dealing with somebody, they'll wait for the person to make a trap, like Jyesta will, and then Jyesta will say, oh, but you just didn't realize that you just undermined yourself by saying this. And they set up ways of making their counterattack very strong. That's like a Jyesta thing. And there are certain points where the nature of Jyesta moon relates with Sagittarius moon. And where they do relate, we call that confluence. Even though they are two completely different types of astrology, really, there are ways, if you don't, you know, there's no scientific science of describing how Jyesta relates with my Leo rising or it relates with my Scorpio sun. But an intuitive astrologer will see the most important points in a person's chart from the Rashi perspective, from the signs and the planets and the signs. And they will also see the key themes and tones relating to their nakshatra. And they will, when you're doing a reading with somebody, you should combine the big prominent themes in a way that the client can effectively integrate these separate parts of the energy field and the psychology into one integrated whole so that they don't feel divided. You can go to lots of astrologers and they'll just tell you all these millions of little details, but they won't integrate it into some practical, singular, focused method of helping you to be more blissful in your life and to unlock the key to the bliss that's waiting in your chart. And it is the same thing when we are dealing with the Chinese signs and the Western signs. I'm hoping, again, I got to keep checking every now and then that I'm on the right screen here. There's no science for how the Chinese signs relate to the Western signs. They're two completely different cultural groundings. And they're two different energy fields. They're two completely different dimensions of the soul. But if we are to be effective astrologers and effective self-realization adepts, we can't necessarily think of them as divided. When I enact my sun as a Scorpio sun and my moon as a Sagittarius moon, everything that those do is going to have the energies of my Chinese signs in them. And sometimes the Chinese sign energy is conducive and positive for the agenda of my Western chart. Sometimes my Chinese sign energies they block and obstruct the agenda that my Western chart is trying to do. But I can't change my Chinese sign nature because it's just as important. And you don't want to think like, yeah, I really ignore my Chinese chart a lot because it really gets in the way of my Vedic chart. It's not going to work that way. Your Chinese sign is a whole other energy field, and for me, I say that it is an important dimension of your luck and of your social energy and dynamics between other people. And if you ignore the Chinese astrology, you will not be as effective in cultivating a self-realized balance of the energy fields. So when you're reading these things, we should consider where the Chinese sign is helpful to your Western chart agenda, and we should consider when your Chinese sign obstructs your Western chart agenda. And just like when you're in a marriage, you've got your attributes that are positive and your partner has their attributes that are positive, and they're different. They don't always mesh. And if you really want to do well in a relationship, Venus teaches us that you can't just say, well, look, the only way this is going to work is if I'm allowed to do mine. Because then the other person's going to say the same thing, and you won't find the harmony. In the same way, your Western chart and your Chinese sign both have agendas that can find a mutual interest in each other because they're one, because they are you. You are whole, regardless of these labels and divisions. So it's very good for us to have the perspective when combining the influences of the Chinese with the Western to see where the confluence is there, where Rabbit and Jupiter they're pretty similar energies in a lot of ways. The Rabbit, the wood sign, the wood energy is ruled by Jupiter in Chinese astrology. Now, they're different energies. We can't think of them necessarily as being the same because they're two different energy fields. But there is a resonance. There's a confluence of symbolic, thematic content with the Rabbit and with Jupiter-ruled people, with the etheric Jupiter. So it is good for us to know that similarity is there, but it also represents perhaps like too much of the same thing, you know? These are the kind of things that we have to think about. And that's confluence, you know, where the Rabbit can be snobbish and escapist because they have a deep sense of what is like the most refined expression of something in the world. That's like very much a Rabbit thing. Jupiter kind of has that etheric sense too. So, you know, if we meet a Sagittarian Rabbit or a Pisces Rabbit, they have the capacity to be snobbish. And we're going to read about that. They think that they have the best sense of the field that they're in. But the rabbit is very humane. The rabbit's in the wood triangle. We're going to talk about that. And the rabbit also ultimately wants to get along with people. It wants to be comfortable, and it won't be too much of that snobbishness with people that it loves. But when it's negative, these are tones that can come out. So feel free to pause this, and I've had it here, so feel free to read it. I don't know if you can see that bottom bit, but what it says is, everything in astrology should be patiently meditated upon in the full context of the self-realization totems which guide your path. Self-realization totems being the points of confluence that are the biggest drivers and movers of your consciousness. That can be different things for different people. If you've got a really weak sun, but a really strong Jupiter, it's not going to be about your sun energy, it's going to be about the luck that your Jupiter brings. So, that's like a totem of your strength. But it also has weaknesses associated with it, just like rabbit has weaknesses associated with it. We want to find the totems of strength and use them to compensate for any weaknesses that we might have. And always consider them in the context of balance and harmony with ourselves, within ourselves, and with those around us. Am I making sense here, people? Are we all following? How do you get the 4 pillars again? Goosey, if you want to get the 4 pillars, I would look them up on Master Tasai. I wonder if I can... I'll type in the names I'll show you a visual example of that name. Master Tasai. Yeah, whatever, just Google it. I don't know the exact thing. Master Tasai. Just look that up on Google. You'll find where you can look up your Chinese astrology chart and find the 4 pillars of your year, your month, your day, and your hour. And you'll learn all about the pillars of your Chinese chart and how they kind of relate to each other. There's another good one that I should say. It's the Universal Tao. If you look up personal chart universal-Tao on Google, look up that specific thing. They've got an even better, it's no problem, Goosey. They've got an even better chart calculator. Chinese astrology is a burgeoning thing in the Western Hemisphere. So we're all still learning how exactly to deal with it. So there's not as many chart calculators for Chinese astrology as there is for Western astrology. And people like me and us, you guys in this discussion, are a part of fixing that imbalance, because I think that the Chinese astrology is deeply important to the health and self-realization of the energy field. Now, I need to get some water so I don't die. I'll be right back. I hate to be displaying my Nestle-owned water bottles. I don't usually recommend the destruction of the planet that way, but they're useful when I'm doing things like this. Okay. Now, I'm going to have to get 2 textbooks. I follow a particular lineage describing the Chinese astrology. My fucking dude, my guy that I love, who is so... I've actually met him, Master Zhongseng Wu. I just met him in December. And I'm taking his Bazi apprenticeship yearly courses. I go down to Philadelphia every December and learn off this guy. And he's just such a beaut. His name is Master Zongseng Wu, and his wife is Dr. Karen Taylor Wu. They have made this book, Heavenly Stems and Earthly Branches, Tiangan DZ. So Tiangan is Heavenly Stems, DZ is Earthly Branches. This book gives you a really deep description of the symbols that we work with when we deal with Chinese astrology. This book, in particular, it's a textbook by the same people. It's particularly Dr. Karen Taylor Wu took the time to write out how this whole Chinese astrology numerical thing is built up on. It's all just mathematics for the Chinese. And it's different from the planets. It's sort of its own thing. If you want to know the depths of the root of the chart, I recommend this book because it tells you how to calculate the Ba Zi chart. Ba Zi meaning the 8-pillar chart. Or the 8, Ba Zi, it'd be like 8 figures, 8 characters chart, something like that. And the 8 is doubled up of the 4 pillars. The 4 pillars is your year sign, month sign, day sign, hour sign, and each sign has a stem as well as a branch. For example, my year is the metal goat. My month is the earth boar. So there's 8 figures when you read the 4 pillars. So that's where my lineage sort of comes from. I also recommend Master Mantak Chia. I'm recently getting into his stuff, and it's awesome. This book right here in particular is just like the bee's knees and really gives a lot of data about all this stuff. I like to mention Master Zongseng Wu because he's the guy that I've seen, and he relates all these things in a deeply shamanic sense of the 5 organ systems and how they relate to each other. He goes through this whole, in these books, sort of, but like when I went to his retreats, he does a conscripted, he has exercises where you meditate consciously on the energy spheres, and it's a Qigong practice where you move the energy between the organ systems consciously as a practice, like almost like a yoga. And it's the best way to learn about what these 5 Chinese elements are and how they relate to us and our soul, because these do deeply relate to the soul in their own way. It's up to us as New Age astrologers, blending the Western with the Chinese, to know what it is about the Chinese astrology that reflects of the soul and what it is about the Western that reflects the soul and how they interrelate. Again, there's no science behind it yet because these are 2 different cultural vantages of the energy field, and they're different parts of the energy field. We don't know how exactly they relate to each other, and that's what I'm exploring with this series with you guys. And thank you for being a part of the experiment. So, all of my data regarding Ba Zi, Chinese astrology, comes from our lineage preceptor, Master Zongseng Wu, whose writings have been blessed by the president of the Chinese Taoist Association, Grandmaster Ren Fa Rong. It's the official Chinese Taoist Association in China. Of course, Master Zongseng Wu himself is natively Chinese. Now, each Chinese animal basically has 6 defining characteristics. You can see them all here, and we're going to go through them all as relates to the sign of the rabbit. Sometimes the signs have a energy body which is different from their place in the cycle. We can see that, like rabbit is part of this wood triangle here. I wonder if I've got a better one there. Anyway, we'll get to it. But essentially, the rabbit is like the purest expression of wood that there is, but it's yin wood. The other two wood signs, tiger, it goes tiger, then rabbit, then dragon. Dragon is like a cardinal earth energy body. Tiger is yang wood, but it's in the fire triangle, and it's also got a bit of earth in it. So it's not a pure expression of wood. The rabbit is yin wood in its energy body. It's the yin wood sign. It is a deep, pure expression of what this wood energy is all about. So if you have like someone with a wood rabbit daymaster sign, is just like so much wood going on there. But I digress. So not only is the rabbit, this is important, not only is the rabbit yin wood energy body, which we're going to say, but it's also in the wood triangle. So it's in a triangle which is trying to subconsciously develop connections between people in a wood way. So that's like with sympathy, with understanding, with communication. The rabbit is like the ultimate diplomat. And a Jupiter rabbit in particular can be very diplomatic, although Sagittarius can be a rather blunt expression of this diplomatic energy. Pisces is less blunt, but more like straight and realistic about its own needs and emotional comforts and desires. Pisces rabbit can be this type of person where like they can roll their eyes over any fiasco, anything going on. The Pisces rabbit will find a way to get them to save face for themselves and say to the person, yeah, well, you just don't realize that, like, you know, I'm doing my thing and like I know it's okay. You are doing this and this and this, and you are fucking up reality more than you realize. And then the person, you know, is bitching at the rabbit, and they just have a way of like, oh, gee, like they can gloss it over, the Pisces rabbit, and we'll talk about it. They say about the rabbit that a clever rabbit always has other holes dug. The rabbit they can be kind of, in the same way that Jupiter, again, this is a confluence factor here. Jupiter is very interested in learning about how its role relates to the world, and it does best when it is actively learning about themselves in relation to any role, any project, any prospect. Rabbit is kind of the same way. So there is the potential for this type of person to be a bit narcissistic. When you really get into the bones of meeting a person, like I know a guy who has this energy, and he's a beaut, particular to Pisces. I know a Pisces rabbit person who's just like such a sweetheart. And there are other parts of their chart that affirm this sweetheartness. So they don't fall into the negativity and narcissism of the rabbit as much, this particular person I'm thinking of. Although it's there, but they don't allow it to be the negative expression, because they're just this person I'm thinking of is an evolved person in general. A rabbit always has several holes dug, so that when a predator comes, or a danger comes, or something in their reality comes along, and like let's say the rabbit's walking along, it's got like 7 holes dug where it can hang out and hide out and exist, right? Because if they are walking along one day, and I gotta check if I'm on the right thing here, yeah. If they're walking along one day and a hole, there's a predator in its hole. It's the hole that it usually goes to. You know, the rabbit doesn't like change for what it's worth, not usually. But when the rabbit's going along, they're very adaptable when they have to be. If a predator is hanging out at its main hole, The rabbit sees it from a mile away, and the predator is like, oh, a rabbit lives here. I'm going to wait for them and I'm going to eat them when they come along. The rabbit's going to smell it, sense it, and they're just going to go and use one of their other holes and just like pretend that that hole that they loved never even existed. It's always got other holes dug. And it's so the rabbit, with this confluent theme of relating to itself, the rabbit's very adaptable, and it learns, it's very self-concerned with saving its own face and with having other comfortable scenarios to sort of escape to when it needs to. Having lots of other people who will hear their woes and love them back to nurture them when they have problems going on. That's the rabbit in general. So the Sagittarius and Pisces rabbit is going to have a good developed sense of itself, typically, and how the Sagittarius or Pisces sun can have several of these holes, several of these social networks with which it can wheel and deal. They're very good networkers too, these people. And they especially know how the Sagittarius or Pisces, in its beloved field or job, can communicate through various networks. And if they're developing something with a group of people and something happens where just the way the rabbit would prefer things to be gets ruined with one group of people, the rabbit will probably have other groups, and they'll start thinking in their heads, okay, so this one is kind of like sucks right now because of this person, so I'm just going to just like try out one of my other groups. It says something to the fact that they're not necessarily inclined to really hold on to other people when things get rough. The rabbit's a funny thing, especially with the Sagittarius and Pisces. The Sagittarius has ability to be more blunt. When it's in a group, it's gonna be like, look, you gotta dig that I like things this way, and this is how we should do things. And the Sagittarius has a bit more grit to kind of get through it. Pisces has the ability to empathize and to sustain a relationship even if it's ugly to them, because they're super sensitive again. And the rabbit doesn't usually stick around when things get ugly like that. And the Pisces, like, it even exacerbates this. Makes it even stronger. The Pisces rabbit, if they're really, really deeply, like, best friends with someone, they'll try to keep that friend for life. They will. But when it comes to associations, with trying to take their energy field and involve it in another energy field that makes it ergonomic to the purposes and feelings and nature of the rabbit, outside of friendship, these people are big on friendship. But outside of that deep sense of people that they deeply love, they'll try to dance around associating with a group that doesn't perfectly fit with what their desires are. Instead of dealing with the people and trying to change or coerce the people, they don't like to deal with that resistance too long. And they got a good deep sense of people. And if they know that those people are ultimately not going to serve their better interests in the long run, they're going to start poking their eyes around the other corner and to see what other places, what other social groups might offer to their nature. So that's a pretty good description of Sag and Pisces rabbit. Now when I'm describing these animals, I like to kind of go through these different defining characteristics a little bit. One of them is, there's different ways of describing each of the animals. Rabbit fits pretty comfortably. It's, again, the themes of the rabbit are very confluent. they're strongly yin wood, right? Like if you've got a rabbit sign as a prominent influence in your chart, it's very yin wood. So it's part of the ascending part of the cycle. They are kind of like innovators. They like to start projects, and they like to have their name on the signature as the person who started the project. They like to glorify their name by having been the person that started it. So they're good at starting projects. They're good at the spring dimension of any project, which is, like the start of a project. And they can see through to the end of it. But particularly with a Jupiter-ruled rabbit, they're going to be best at, like, feeling all over for who would be good to start my desires with. They're good with people and developing a strong foundation for a project. And what they'll also probably do is they'll associate themselves with people who will see to the end of the project, because that's just part of their wisdom. They have a sense of the spring, summer, fall, and winter that is needed in any project as an initiating energy, Some people, like the monkey and the rooster, on the other side of things, they're not as interested in developing and seeing how people will work for the long run. They just they'll pick, rooster and monkey will just pick up whoever's around and be like, look, I've got a brilliant thing that will last long, and we're going to see it through to the end no matter how fucked up things get. That's kind of like monkey and rooster are good with that. On the opposite of the rabbit. The rabbit's more about, like, I'm going to think very deeply about the people that I'm interacting with now so that we can, in the long run, be emotionally secure and comfortable with each other so that there's less problems. Sag, Pisces, rabbit, I could see, is very much like that. They're also good at, because the Jupiter's ventilating sense of the nature of the world and of wisdom, they're going to be good at finding genius, innovative ways of having a new product style. They're trendsetters in this way. A new thing that will lend itself well in the world to initiate it and start it. Now we're looking at the numerical yin and yang. What this means is that in the same way in astrology, there's water and earth are more passive, and fire and air signs are more active. It's the same thing here. Not only is rabbit like yin energy, whoa, what's going on here? Not only is rabbit like on the, I guess you could call the ascending would be more like the yang side, and then the descending is yin. So the rabbit is on the initiating yang side in this particular instance, but how we said how rabbit's energy body is yin wood. It's also like it's an even numbered animal, which means just like this whole group, it's like the water and earth of Western astrology. It's a passive sign. And it's not as good at like enduring and smashing its head against some resistance. It's better at coming back and thinking intellectually, how do I get around the boulder instead of how do I save my energy for the long run by going around the boulder instead of just butting my head through it. And both of these types of personalities, of course, are important. But we see confluence where the rabbit is a yin wood animal, and it's more about dodging the boulder, So this tells you the nature of the diplomatic energy of the rabbit, where it would rather not fight or confront. It would rather dance diplomatically and just sort of side shift whatever insults come its way and just be like, look, I don't care about this insult you made, dude, because I've got a bigger picture in mind that you wouldn't understand. And that can piss people off. It's kind of the nature of the rabbit. But they're hard to hit. If you try to hit the rabbit with an arrow, it sees it coming and it's just going to know how to fucking dodge it. Just because that's what the rabbit is constantly looking at. Where could the arrows be coming from? And how do I be prepared for it, you know? It's part of, and, you know, some people think that that makes the rabbit weak. But who's going to be the last man standing? What does strength really mean, you know? The rabbit is very often the last man standing, and you can define strength however you like, but, you know, for me, the rabbit, that's part of what strength can be. Now we're looking at modality. This is sort of like squares, in the same way that the Western astrology has squares. The earth signs are their own thing. We don't need to talk about them. Energetic yang means the fixed sign animals. The Chinese animals relate to mutable, fixed, mutable, and cardinal signs in the same way of the Western. But, you know, for example, the rabbit, the month of the rabbit relates with Pisces. And there's a bit of a symbolic confluence between Pisces and the rabbit naturally. But you shouldn't think about it that way, because these are two completely different energy fields. My advice to you is to consider that the rat is not like Sagittarius, even though it's associated with it, and the rabbit is not like Pisces, even though it's associated with it. The horse is not like Gemini, even though it's associated with it. They kind of are like them, but don't think about it that way, because these are, as I said, people get very confused when they think like, you know, like, oh, I'm a rabbit and I'm a Pisces, so there's must be like double Pisces energy there, right? No, it's not a good way to think about it. We have to be discerning when we're dealing with these cultural symbologies, knowing that they're coming from two different places. So, but these four animals, rabbit, horse, rooster, and rat, they're energetically yin, which means that they're more adaptive. They don't, again, in the same, this is another thing that says that the rabbit doesn't try to smash its head into the boulder until the boulder's obliterated. The rabbit, like the rat and the horse and the rooster, finds ways of dodging problems, or not just dodging, but getting around them, saving the energy that might come from like it's an art of war consciousness that these four have. You know, Sun Tzu says in The Art of War, if you corner an enemy, let's say you've got 5,000 soldiers and you corner an army that has only 500 soldiers, okay? Those 500 soldiers have like an urgent energy that's like I'm about to die, so like fuck it, like I'm just gonna throw myself at this. So if you corner the 500 with your 5,000 and you try to go in there and get them, you could lose like 1,500 soldiers trying to kill that 500 because of the situation. What Sun Tzu says is, don't go at them directly. Send in an ambassador and say to the leader of the 500 soldiers, if you join our army, you won't die. We'll let a little bit of your culture survive, but you're going to have to assimilate into our culture, or you can die. And if the 500 soldiers are smart, unless they're, I don't know, unless back in the old days, a lot of times like, no, we're going to do it for the Mongols, or whatever, you know. Sun Tzu says that it's wiser to save energy in the long run, and you should find the way to do that. That's the kind of consciousness of these energetic yin types, you know. How do you ergonomically and intelligently deal with the figure rather than just, I'm just going to blast through it? And I should say that there's a square thing happening, just like in Western astrology. Rabbit is square to the rat, and rabbit is opposite the rooster, and rabbit is square to the horse. Rabbit and horse can get along okay, but rabbit and rat have a lot of problems. In fact, the Korean version of Chinese astrology calls the rabbit the year of the cat. And it's because of what we're talking about. If you've ever heard that and you're confused by it, this is exactly the reason why. It's because the rabbit is also called the cat. And the cat is always thinking about how it can have one paw over the rat. And the rat really, really, really gets unnerved by that. And they're aware of it. But rat's like the start of the cycle, and rat's very powerful. So these two can just be a cat and a mouse, Tom and Jerry, just constantly going in circles around each other, trying to save their own face. These mutable signs are kind of prideful. I'm the horse day master, and I know this in myself. I love to have the freedom to do what I want to do, and if anyone messes with that, I get really frustrated with them. And rabbit day master people, I can relate with them in this way sometimes, although it ultimately tends to go pretty good. I have a harder time with rat day master. Just like rabbit is opposite rooster, and that's a deeply frustrating combination to have, which we're probably going to talk about at some point, I think. Oh, I guess maybe not. But, this is a theme that you'll read into whenever you read about the rabbit, the fact that it's opposite the rooster. And we can talk about it, and I talk about them in my other Chinese videos. If you want to hear more about these, feel free to look up my the energetic bodies of the Chinese animals. I've got that video here on How to Rock Spirit somewhere. But for now, just know that the rabbit is a mutable sign, it's adaptable, and so are these other three, and they can frustrate each other when dealing with each other. But they can also be powerful together. That's the thing, is that these animals, when they have similar ways of thinking, but that similar way of thinking is going towards different agendas and directives, right? For better or worse. If you've got a rabbit person in a group, they're going to be thinking and being adaptable and laying out terms and terminologies and ways of making the group think about things differently. And the horse and rat and rooster all do that too. But they're pining for a different agenda. The rabbit's agenda is essentially wood. It's its own comfort, and it's the creature comforts of everyone else, and diplomacy. And rat is not about that. Rat is just about kind of like power and just sort of raw martial instinct. It's in the water triad, and rat is just more about like a sort of hard biting nature of reality. And the rat, but it can be good, because the rat says to our group, we've got to be strong and we've got to use our strength to overtake our competitors. And sometimes the rabbit just doesn't care about that. The rabbit's more about defining an energy field which is strong in itself, and who cares about what the competitors are thinking of. And the rat and rabbit will both try to convince everyone else in the group that this is the direction we should go in towards. Rat says, let's go have more strength and be cunning. Rabbit can be very cunning too. But rabbit doesn't necessarily want to have to fight or constantly go out and rabbit would rather use its intelligence to get away from fighting, and the ergonomic innovation of the people in its sphere to get away from having to do that. And rat says to rabbit, don't be such a pussy. Let's just fuck up the competition with our strength and vigor and cunning, and rat has this sort of he who laughs last laughs best kind of thing. And so does rabbit, again. But this is just an example about how the two of them will try to adapt the group towards these different directives. And a lot of the times the rabbit, if rat calls rabbit out for being a pussy, the rabbit will get deeply insecure and just find ways of just they'll deflect the rat for a long time, but secretly they'll be like undercutting the ground that rat stands on. And then one day rat falls into a ditch, and rat's like, who the hell did... This is a rabbit hole, you know? That's just kind of how these sort of relationships work with the squares of the mutable animals. And it tells us something about the rabbit being like adaptive and trying to get away, or trying to manipulate, not manipulate, but convince the group energy to go in its direction. And a lot of times it's very good and it's very correct. The rabbit can be a great diplomat for any group. The rabbit knows what the group's needs are and what it can offer to other groups and other companies. So rabbit goes to the other company and says, is very suave and dresses all nicely and well, and knows how to convince the other company that this is a very well-to-do individual, but we know what we like and we do mean business, and it would be in our mutual interest to conduct matters as a partnership. And the rabbit, in its best nature, actually does do that well, where it actually knows how to integrate the whole group to another group effectively. And he wants to do it with a genuine faith and genuine connection that's like kind of comes from a mutual sympathy of both groups. I mean, like, rat can do the same thing, but rat's better at sort of like ultimately making their group win, and that's a very good energy too, you know. So these are all things to think about. Now again, rabbit's energetic yin is same thing here. It's mutable, it's adaptable. I'm kind of saying the same thing here, but these two are not necessarily the same thing. Anyway, blah. So we just talked about that. Now, is all these energies that we just talked about in regards to the rabbit, is it helpful and complementary, or does it overdo the balance for Jupiter, for a Sagittarius or a Pisces person? I would say that there's there's a good and bad in every combination. I would say that this adaptability on the rabbit's part really, the rabbit, for what it's worth, it's this, you know, with this cunningness, with this sense of how to undercut its enemies without actually looking like it did anything wrong. You know, all these things, I mean, we could view them as being like evil and malicious. But what if the rabbit is doing this for like a group that's got genuine positive interests, you know? Again, sometimes the Chinese have this sense of like who gets the last laugh. And the rabbit is very good at making itself and its group, if it's really dedicated to its group, have the last laugh, because of its leadership qualities lend itself towards kind of lasting and coming through and having a sense not only for their whole group but also as an individual relating to the group. And particular to Sagittarius and Pisces, this leadership can come in the form of having a good sense of people, having a good sense of making people convinced that the rabbit is in their better interests and is looking out for their emotional and comfort and wellness. And the rabbit will deliver on that. It's, you know, if the rabbit promises that we want comfort, because comfort and whatever we've got to do in ourselves to make the energy of the group sort of last longest, like emotionally, it's good at instilling these emotional connections so that people feel like everyone is communicating and everyone is not feeling left out. They're a great communicator. The Sagittarius is a bit more blunt in this regard, and that's a good combination. Sometimes the Sagittarius can undermine what the rabbit tries to do with its bluntness, but a lot of the readings that we're going to read say that the rabbit calms down the bluntness of Sagittarius, and Sagittarius reduces rabbit's inclination to be non-confrontational. Rabbit can be non-confrontational, and Sagittarius kind of helps to fix that and compensate for that, because Sagittarius knows what it needs for itself on the inside. And that's pretty positive. In fact, again, when we do the readings of Sagittarius Sun with Pisces, with Rabbit, you're going to see that it's generally positive. And same thing with Pisces. Pisces is super imaginative. Pisces Rabbit in particular is super imaginative. They're sensitive, they're empathic, and the Pisces has that 12th house sense of like serving. So the Pisces Rabbit, one aspect of the holes that the Pisces Rabbit digs is a sense that they can serve people a lot. They can make other people feel emotionally understood, and they can kind of be a voice for other people in a way, but they won't usually do it in a confrontational way, but they'll do it in a way where, you know, Jerry is too self-conscious to speak his voice to the group, so the Pisces Rabbit will, while the whole group is, you know, figuring their stuff out, or before, you know, the Pisces Rabbit will go to the boss and say, you know, I think that Jerry has a lot to offer the group in regards to this particular thing, and he would express it well if he was given an open door to express it without judgment. And the Pisces Rabbit will kind of like, come on, just trust me, you know, like I think that person has a lot to offer. And that person, when that all comes through, and the Pisces Rabbit will make sure to wink and say, just like I told you, you know, the boss knows your talents, and he opened the door for you just like I knew that it would. And he winks. And that person knows that the Pisces Rabbit did something to cultivate and catalyze that open door. And that's so down the road, because the Pisces Rabbit was so selflessly serving to that person's emotional regard, when the rabbit gets in trouble, and at any time, the rabbit can go to that person who they selflessly served and said, you know, I'm just having a little bit of trouble right now with this other person. And that person will say, I got you. I remember what you did for me. That's part of the Pisces Rabbit. The rabbit having many, it's almost like the Pisces also helps the rabbit have many holes to help itself through. It's a wood type. Wood is just this is such a deeply wood type. Wood is like constantly developing a insulation from the sharp things of the world to build itself up, to constantly be supporting the energy field of the rabbit, just like of going upwards. Mind you, if this person is a Jupiterian person and they have that way of doing that, even Sagittarius kind of does that, but it's more about like Sagittarius is less of doing it in the emotional regard and more about doing it in like the world. Sagittarius will selflessly like, I don't know if this project's gonna work out, but let's try it, boys. And the Sagittarius will have many different projects, and that'll give them a worldly wisdom. And so whenever they'll probably get well knowledgeable about their field, again, they'll be a snob, and they'll, not necessarily a snob, but there's like a feeling that they have a high refined sense of whatever field they've found that they're very interested in. And they'll have many examples and anecdotes from their worldly experience that are kind of like a whole that they can say that they could refer back to. Or, you know, they'll have several jobs too, or, you know, these guys can be like good like stockbrokers and stuff, and they'll have several people who they can, several projects that they can wheel and deal with. I was going to say something else. If the Sagittarius or Pisces sun has a weak Jupiter, then these people will take their faithful energy and their wheeling and dealing energy, and they might really deeply invest it into the material world in the sense of Gemini or Virgo Jupiter, or in the sense of Taurus or Libra Jupiter, if Jupiter is in any of those. The Jupiter of this person will invest in emotional groups, in diplomacy in like the Libra sense, and they'll overextend that. You know, if you got Sagittarius sun with Jupiter in Libra and they're a rabbit, you might have somebody who extends their promises to another group. You know, you send this rabbit as an ambassador out to talk to other groups. You might even find that they stick their nose into that other group and be like, oh, you know, things seem pretty nice over here. And all of a sudden they're making deep connections with like another group. And they have to, the Jupiter in Libra is a little bit too optimistic about saying, I can keep my promises with them. And then they go to another group and they do the same thing. Now, all of a sudden, let's say you have the leader of these three different groups all coming to the rabbit at the same time and saying, so, you know, you've been committed to our group and it's very good. Now, on February 19th, our group needs to get together and get this job done. And the rabbit says, sure, to this one group. And then the leader of another group and says, so of course you must know that our group has a group, our first unveiling on February 19th. And you got to be there for it. The rabbit says, yeah, okay, I can do that. Because the Jupiter's in Libra. And it's like, I'll make it work. And then the third guy comes along and says, so you've really got to be here on February 19th. And so the rabbit has three different people. The Sagittarius sun was faithful about the fact that I'll make it work. And the Jupiter in Libra says, don't worry, guys, I'll make it all happen. And so the rabbit goes to the first guy's group and is like, hey, I'm here, everybody. And he's on his phone trying to work out the complications for the other two groups. And the boss comes up and says, hey, so, you know, stop looking at your phone. We got to start to get to work. And they're like, okay, I'm listening. And the boss is like, why aren't you fully here right now with your energy? This is the kind of thing that this particular sort of rabbit can get into. And they'll deeply undermine the woody support that the rabbit really needs to survive. So when these sorts of people get into this, it's kind of a bad thing to do, really. You know, and Taurus Jupiter would be the same kind of way. Jupiter in Gemini or Virgo, like I said, would be the same sort of thing, except that it's towards group. Like they can't, like it's impossible for them to manage their time effectively because they got so many different material projects that are spread out. That's if you've got, for example, Sagittarius sun with Jupiter in Gemini or Virgo, right? Where Jupiter doesn't do as well. Especially if there's things that are making the Jupiter maligned, like Saturn with the Jupiter there. So these are all important things to consider with the nature of the rabbit. But what I will say is that if the rabbit's word, the rabbit is big about his word. His word, a part of the strength of the rabbit is when his word is gold. Because that is when, like I said with the Pisces sun rabbit helping their buddy by saying, don't worry, I'll pull through for you. I'll make that thing happen. You know, that's when that person is ready from their woody heart to help the rabbit in any time of need. That's a hole for the rabbit, and that is what gives the rabbit the self-confidence to stand and be ready for any emotional complication, because they've got a thing that has helped them. If they undermine their word to their groups because the Sag or the Pisces was a little bit too willing to extend itself, the rabbit loses the confidence of other people. And that's a very bad place for a rabbit to be, because that confidence is part of what makes the rabbit strong. That confident diplomat energy, that ambassador, and that person who has all this emotional support and the ability to wheel and deal. If rabbit loses any of these things because of any complications in the Western chart, the rabbit will get sick to his stomach, and it will be hard for him to deal with the reality that he has created for himself. So these are all cool things to think about. Now, the rabbit, every animal has hidden stems usually, and this differentiates the nature of the energy. But the rabbit is only yin wood. It's pure yin wood. So this really goes a long way to tell you that this wood energy, this support, this emotional sympathy support and networking capacity and communication capacity is a deeply important tone to the rabbit. And it's how we should look at Chinese astrology is that it is a key factor of the rabbit's luck. And that rabbit will have great luck if it can hold that woody sympathy and emotional support from other groups of people. And it'll be deeply damaged if that is undermined. Now, one more thing we're going to talk about, and it's going to be kind of getting at the same thing, is we're going to talk about the rabbit's triad, which is the wood triad. We've been talking about the nature of wood energy anyway. But it's important to consider the rabbit in the context of the wood triangle, to know that, like, I'm like a goat with lots of boar energy. So when I meet someone who has lots of rabbit energy, I know how they can contribute to what it is that I'm doing as a person who's in the wood triangle. The wood triangle is like a psychic connection field where the goat, the boar, and the rabbit, being in the wood triangle, are all trying to develop a feng shui network of people who bring out their luck. The luck that wood has to offer. And rabbit has a place in that triangle that makes them effective in certain ways. They're the adaptable one. And we're going to read about that just as soon. Oh gosh, I hate having to do this. I wasn't doing this before, but I guess I gotta, every now and then when I look back on here, I've got to re-sign in to YouTube. So that is what I'm doing at this moment. I'm just checking to make sure if any of you guys have left me any comments. Because of course, as much as these videos are just me flapping my gab, I do want you guys to know that we're always welcome to communicating about in these videos. Tom and Jerry, cool. Cool, Goosey. About how rabbit and rat are kind of like this constant fighting between Tom and Jerry, right? I'm going to go to the bathroom again. And we are going to get into how the rabbit relates to its psychic feng shui luck network, the wood triangle. moving right along. Just gonna flurf up my hair a little bit here. There we go. Now I'll look a little bit more like a Leo, don't I? Surprise. Okay. Hope you guys are liking my style. I'm always trying to freaking try stupid, different, fashionable things. I'm the water horse, and I find that the horse is just like, yeah, let's try this, like, crazy thing, and sometimes it works out. I'm kind of liking this style. Yeah, let's get into the wood triangle. And we can see here that these are the triangle derivations. Yeah. These are the triangle derivations. Rabbit, pig, and goat are all in the wood triangle. In certain texts, the harmony triads are incorrectly labeled. This is due to an inference from the signs that correlate with the Western zodiac. Like I said, you shouldn't think of the rabbit as being like Pisces, because Pisces is like a water sign. So, rabbit is not like that that 4-element module that we think of the water signs in Western astrology has nothing to do with the rabbit. So, don't, mix those up. The rabbit, the goat, and the pig are all in the wood triangle. And when they get together, they express wood energy together. Now the following represents the correct inference, sourced from our lineage preceptor, Master Zongxing Wu. The partners in your shared harmony triad, as well as your secret allies, these represent people who are psychically building the same kind of feng shui social network luck that you are. And so they harmonize well with you. We don't talk about the best friends in here, but just for your reference, the best friend of the rabbit is the dog. It's like a secret best friend. Goat and horse are best friends. Boar and tiger are best friends. Or secret ally, that's what it is. Goat and horse are secret allies. Boar and tiger are secret allies. And rabbit and dog are secret allies. And dog really deeply sympathizes with the nature of the rabbit. And the dog is just a little bit tougher. So the rabbit can have a strong, wonderfully woody, intuitive sense of how the diplomacy of the network that they deal with ought to run in any group. And the dog will talk to the rabbit about it, and they mutually have a good way they just communicate with each other very naturally. And so the dog will take the advice and insight from the rabbit, and the dog will be the guard dog that will like say, all right, everybody, and he'll slam his fist on the table and say, this is how we gotta work together. And that really helps the rabbit, who generally is kind of prefers to be non-confrontational. The shared enjoyment of mutual space brings out the luck and cosmic swing between animals in the same harmony triad. We can see here that rabbit, sheep, and boar are all in the same triangle, the wood triangle. And these triads represent the primary grouping in Chinese astrology, at least where behavioral psychology is concerned. So we've been talking about how very much wood the rabbit is. But that's like on its surface. Its essential root is also wood. And it's not the same, it's not like that for all the other animals. When we talk about the sheep, we're going to talk about the sheep in like 4 more episodes, we're going to see that the sheep is in the it's in the wood triangle, and it has wood qualities, but it's a yin earth animal mixed with fire. It's fire and yin earth on its surface. So it deals with this essential root, which is wood, in the same diplomacy and sympathy and connections that we've been talking about with the rabbit. The sheep has that as its essential root, but how it deals with people is with yin earth and fire, which is a different thing. The rabbit is wood on the surface and wood at its root. So it's very, very concerned with this diplomacy thing. And we're going to talk about the wood triad, and this is good because this will give us a deep sense of this wood nature of the rabbit that we've been talking about. And remember that these animals work together to develop this sense of sympathy and communication between each other and everyone else in the group. The fourth triangle of affinity is ruled by the 4th, 8th, and 12th branches, also known as the rabbit, the sheep, and the boar. This group of catalysts is composed of the intuitive, sympathetic, and cooperative personality types who bring about changes in others without changing themselves. Supportive, sincere, and generous. People who occupy the wood triad they're not only keen observers, but they're also skilled in self-preservation. It's the wood. It just figures out the same thing with the rabbit finding all these holes, you know. Boar and sheep also know how to keep themselves plodding along in their own regard. Artistic, impressionable, and creative. These are the guardians of the visual arts. They're experts in communication, computers, broadcasting, the movie industry, and the music world. Acting as movers and shapers behind the scenes, this trio has their finger on the pulse of all segments of society, and they know how to make things happen for their own benefit, consciously or unconsciously. They know how to take the figures and people and media and culture and submerge themselves all in it and learn how to make what they have in their reality fit to that world, and also, but more than that even, to make the world around them fit to their nature that lies within all these different cultural figures. Now, often these people may be too sensitive to changes or negative influences from others. I wonder if I can make this. I just want you to be able to see the 3. Blah, whatever. So that they may be too sensitive to changes, or negative influences from others, so that they change their minds easily or have feelings of insecurity. They tend to be inconsistent and dependent on others to affect the changes they desire. They tend to schmooze and wheel and deal and sort of promise this person that they'll do this if they do this for this person, instead of directly confronting. They'll sort of get someone else to do their dirty work, so to say, when that needs to happen. And it sucks for them when they are dealing with a direct confrontation and they just fuck, they got to figure out how can I make myself protected in this situation and not actually have to deal, they don't like to deal with completely confrontational energy. And so they'd rather dance around it. And if they dance around it in a way that causes more contention, more tension, more, if they try to save face and insult the other person, then that person will come up with even more direct energy, and then they'll be like, fuck, and then they might just dip. They might just leave the scene where it was a perfect scene for them, but, they kind of escaped from it instead. Sagittarius rabbit is kind of saved from this, but the Pisces rabbit might be guilty of not facing the confrontation that they should be facing. Although they're such sweethearts that we tend to just In dealing with the occupants of this is called the catalysts. I should have said that. They are the catalysts, like I said, of communication and sympathy and emotional, opening the heart. Like I was talking about the Pisces sun helping the person. I'll tell the boss that you've got something to offer, and then they tell the boss, and the boss says, I heard that you've got skill in this way, that is a the rabbit is being a catalyst in that regard. Or the Sagittarius rabbit is in the catalyst triangle, so it will know how to make Jerry see the skills in Tom, and then they'll make them work together, and then the Sagittarius rabbit will say, just remember who brought you two together, wink. In dealing with the occupants of the catalyst triad, remember that boar and sheep are also catalysts in this way. They like to make connections between people. So, in dealing with the catalyst triad, one must not expect unconditional support and unwavering loyalty. That's what I was talking about with the rabbit. Remember, they seek to bring people together in the universal spirit of cooperation. They'll be able to introduce you to all the right people and make connections one would not dream possible. But they cannot and will not force relationships, nor should you expect them to stay and hold your hand through thick and thin. The wood people are super sensitive, and they'd rather, again, there's a part of them that's just constantly thinking, I love this person and I'll help them through a lot, but, I'm here when you need a shoulder to cry on. That's kind of the rabbit's thing very much. If you ever need somebody to just sit with you and console you and talk with you about, maybe give you a different sense of how your emotions relate to your situation, I'm always here to help you. But if you, are on a mission to rampage the gates of someone else's castle, I'd rather just stay at home. I'm rooting for you, but I'm not going to join you. That's the homebodies of these three, especially the rabbit. The rabbit, like the boar will kind of storm the gates with you a bit more. And the goat isn't that interested in it either. The goat is like the middle of these two. Boar will storm the gates with you. Rabbit will not. Rabbit will just completely keeping himself away from all confrontation. The goat will help you at the gates in whatever way they can, even if it's them insulting other groups. The goat will kind of I am with you and I'll do what I can to help. I won't fully put myself in there with the war, but I'll summon all of my peasants to make food for your soldiers, that's what the goat will do. Whereas boar will be a soldier. But the rabbit will they're a diplomat and they don't want to mess their relation with the other team up. The rabbit will just be there for you to console and to help. Well, I guess I got to deal with that at some point. But the rabbit is ultimately a homebody who will just find his own way to sort of deal with things without causing too much trouble, So they might not stick with you through thick and thin and hold your hand the whole way. The rabbit just knows it knows its skills that it can do, particularly the Pisces rabbit. It knows its skills that it can do to make the world a better place. So these personalities are not famous for their constancy, and they tend to indulge themselves when given the opportunity, like with sensuality and with pleasures and with an opportunity to get themselves higher. They prefer to have a group get higher up with them, but they are very concerned with their own creature comforts and their own honor, particularly the rabbit again. So they have no inclination for long, painful battles of wills, and they don't provoke or start fights, even when they have just cause. They'd rather just get the last laugh some other way, through their own power and abilities and opportunities. Being really pitiful is kind of beneath them, and it's beneath the rabbits for sure. True to their peaceful natures, the catalyst triad make good arbitrators and referees. Because they find it easy to understand and identify with others and with various groups, and they're not too competitive or combative in their approach, they're most likely to succeed in getting everyone to join forces with them, because they're Switzerland, they don't want to cast their chips in any team's bag and say, this is the team that I want to go for, which can be annoying because everyone's like, so whose side are you really on? But when you really think about it, they're on the side of like that universal spirit of cooperation. So it might be frustrating when you think like, fuck, I've been with this rabbit guy for so long, I can't believe he's not on my side on this. But when the whole battle goes through and everything's said and done, the rabbit will have a place for you whether you won or lost, because they are constantly thinking of like the overarching universal spirit of kinship. And they will hold on to their deeper connections. But they're always looking to try and see how the wood can overturn the way that the dust has settled. The fire triad is more like, like if I'm on your side, then I'm on your side to the end, and I will fight for you to the end, to the depths, for not only our team. I mean, again, the fire triad, which is tiger, horse, and dog, they work well with this wood triad. They're kind of thinking in the same way. But it's easier for the fire triad people to sort of stick with a buddy who they've fought battles with through thick and thin. That's very much the fire triad. The wood triad, the catalysts, are just more interested in like what's gonna make my life easiest in the long run. It's very much what these people think like. But so they're peaceable and they're non-combative. And so that's why in the end they're most likely to succeed in getting everyone to join forces with them. Approachable, obliging, and diplomatic. The wood triad knows how to make friends and appease enemies to the best of their advantage. Anyone who wants to work with this group of catalysts should emphasize the virtues of compromise instead of confrontation, and the benefits of negotiation instead of open conflict. These indispensable experts of give and take will be successful in working out their problems and the problems of others in their own special, unique way. So anyone looking to work with a Sagittarius or Pisces rabbit person should really be aware that they will work with this person best when they deal in a spirit of cooperation and compromise. Compromise is a big word for everyone in this triad, and certainly for the Sagittarius and Pisces rabbit. When you're dealing with the Sagittarius rabbit, and you're dealing with a person who sows many seeds in various places, and you want this person to you want to get it into their network, you want to get into their friend circle, show them you can't force it. You definitely can't like come up to them and be like, hey, you smack them on the chest and say, hey, I heard that you can get me the job at wherever, The person would be like, yeah, I'll put in a good word for you. Not fucking asshole, But if you do something for them and you just sort of are like, I'm very interested in being a part of this company, and whatever I can do to help you or to do a favor for you or something in order to sort of get where I want to be in that company, I would, let me know. Maybe I can, whatever skill I have, I can help you do help you out. And if you, an opportunity to help a Sagittarius Sun rabbit is opening the door to somebody who is now thinking about how they can use you productively with other groups, so they're a great person to be connected with in that way, because that one day they might call you and say, hey, I've got a job where I could use you. Just out of the blue, they'll do that. That's like the Sag rabbit way. And for a Pisces Sun rabbit, if have an opportunity to help them, you might be opening the door for yourself to have a person who will really sit and help you digest your emotional issues, or someone who will be a good coordinator where you can talk to this person about your problems, and they'll say, well, it seems to me like the emotional way of this person is like this, and the emotional way of this person is like this, and you're trying to get them together. I don't think it'll ever work. You know, a Pisces rabbit is a good person to talk about that kind of thing, right? And they'll also probably be there for you as a good friend if the door is opening for you to have the opportunity to associate with them in that sort of way. So the rest of this is kind of probably stuff that you can just sort of poke at in your own time. This video is going a bit longer than I thought it would, but we do have to get to the individual sign combinations. Feel free to pause this and read it, but basically what it says is that where Tropical Astrology emphasizes the unconscious outside of any social context, you know, how your sun relates to Sagittarius and where your Jupiter is, and whether it's got positive or benefic or malefic influences to it, are going to describe the way your Jupiter buoyant nature is without any social context. Tropical astrology shows how the light of your awareness is internally guided through past impressions, ego development, and logic towards your involvement with others. It's like how you are when nobody's around. What is your will outside the context of interpersonal dynamics? The Chinese is more about knowing what your natural subconscious feng shui is and how the feng shui of your subconscious preferences in dealing with people will attract luck through the subconscious preferences of other people. You know, this is how you as a rabbit work well with the boar or the goat, or if you're dealing with a rooster or an ox or a snake as a rabbit person, you're going to know that you're dealing with hardened, emotionally tough intellectuals who are logical and rational. And if you're a rabbit, that's not necessarily the best way that you deal. And if you're dealing with any of those three, you've got to know that you just got to know how to deal with the way their consciousness is, and know what your strengths and your consciousness, and when there's a confrontation with anyone from that triangle, which could happen, you've got to know how to deal with them. You know, these are the kind of things that Chinese astrology can teach us. Feng Shui attracts others of like mind by understanding how our neurological aesthetic works with those of others. We can attract others who expand us with little effort, and also be sympathetic to those whose subconscious is different but possibly compensatory to our own. You know, you as a rabbit person can get a lot out of ox, rooster, and snake because of the way those people think about the world in a different way than you do. Because everyone thinks about the world through one particular orientation, and we're only stronger together when we work together despite and in the light of our mutual differences and similarities. This is coming from someone who's in the year of the goat, you know, and the month of the boar. I've got that wood consciousness, and that's my interpretation of how feng shui luck, between interpersonal luck, can add great strength and great luck, interpersonal communication luck, to the Western chart as it is described in tropical and tropical Vedic astrology. And then there's the dasha periods. We kind of already talked about these, right? So I'm just gonna, this is if you're in your Mercury dasha as a Jupiter person, this will, you know, you can feel free to read that, pause the video, and learn a bit about that. We've already read the Saturn thing. This is how Jupiter relates to Saturn. And if you're in the Saturn dasha, fuck, I did this stupidly. That just looks retarded. I'm in the, I said, I'm a wood person, and aesthetics are very important to me. I don't know why I did it this way. But feel free to pause the video here, take a look at how Saturn, let me just see, take a peek at how the Saturn Dasha might affect you as a Jupiter person, and consider the nature of the rabbit in that Dasha thing. Now let's consider what some other authors have said on the subject of this Western sun sign, Sagittarius and Pisces, in combination with this Chinese sign. Next video. All right. So we're gonna kill this video for now, and I'm going to first look at some comments, see if you guys. Man, this is so annoying. I didn't have to do. Oh, sweet. Here we go. Yeah, that's right. 2019 is the Earth Boar this year. Goosey, that's quite correct. And you got it. Metal Rat. Yeah, that is Metal Rat in 2020. 2019, this year, is the very exact nature of my month branch, as the Earth Boar is my month branch, my month pillar. So this year, ideally, according to the science of Ba-Zi, this year might have something crazy, mystical to bring in relation to my relationship with deeply, very much myself, but also I think my parents and my culture. Still working. Well, at the end of this year, I'm going to know exactly what it means, but it usually means something important when there's a figure in your Ba-Zi chart that is exactly related to, but with the stem and the animal, that exactly is a figure in your chart, whether it's your year, your month, your day, and your hour, right? I'm the Earth Boar, and I'm the Earth Boar in my month pillar, and we're coming into the Earth Boar year. So I'll be talking about it and seeing how exactly it all comes through and how it relates to me, So thank you for watching, my friend Goosey, and to everyone else who's been watching and viewing the video. Thank you so much for being a part of the experience of How to Rock Spirit, and of combining this series where we're combining Chinese signs with tropical astrology. I'm going to quit this video for now, and then I'm going to set up another video, feel free to join, where we are going to talk about Sagittarius Sun, and then after that we're also going to talk about Sagittarius Sun coming through Rabbit energy, and then we're going to talk about Pisces Sun coming through Rabbit energy. I deeply hope that you guys have enjoyed this, and I'll see you in just a little bit.